European Union has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. There were gasps of surprise when the announcement was made in the Norwegian capital Oslo. The EU was chosen over other contenders that included the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, the former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, and Egyptian activist Wael Ghonim. Tim Friend reports.
This, the signing of the Treaty of Rome in 1957, to this, anti-austerity rioting on the streets of Athens this year. The European Union has not always achieved its aims to bring peace and prosperity. But the Nobel Committee praised the 27-nation bloc for rebuilding the region after the devastation of World War II.
The Union and its forerunners have over 6 decades contributed to the advancement of peace and reconciliation, democracy and human rights in Europe.
This award will be controversial. Critics see the EU as a superstate which sometimes fails to consult its people, but its leaders believe the institution is a worthy winner.
It is indeed a great honor for all the 500 million citizens of Europe, for all the member states and all the European institutions, this Nobel Prize for Peace.
The EU's work has ranged from supporting refugee camps in Africa to peacekeeping in the Balkans. But it's this event that has shaped the EU's rapid expansion, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Since then, former Soviet bloc countries have joined. The celebrations have sometimes been overshadowed by the huge challenge of guiding policy and a single currency that can create its own economic difficulties for member states. Even before the current crisis, conflict had spilled onto the streets in protest against an agricultural policy that had led to huge stockpiled food mountains to protect prices while others went without. But EU leaders believe they've achieved an ever closer union that replaced warfare with rising wealth. Tim Friend, Al Jazeera.
Joining us now from Brussels is Anton Laguardia, a columnist for The Economist. I suppose, Anton Laguardia, the EU could do with a bit of good news, given all the gloom surrounding the economies of so many countries within the Eurozone. But this award will have a lot of people simply scratching their heads. Why the EU and why now?
Well, I mean, we were all rather surprised this morning, as indeed I think the people in the building behind me were when they heard the news. Why the EU? Because the EU over 6 decades has consolidated peace in the European continent. It has brought in countries such as Spain and Portugal and Greece that had been controlled by military dictatorships, and after the fall of the Berlin Wall had brought in countries of the former communist East. That's on the achievement side. But the European project has been, deeply in trouble over the crisis of the euro, which may yet collapse and may bring down the rest of the EU with it.
And for the committee to be looking back at the committee, as you say, looking back at those 6 decades of the EU's work to justify this award, will seem like perhaps it may have run out of ideas, run out of candidates. Was this the kind of underlying logic? Because a lot of people simply cannot get the point of the EU being awarded this. The last organization winning such an award outright was Médecins Sans Frontières, a very different kind of organization.
Indeed, I think it was a warning, really, from the Nobel Peace Committee saying, look, you've done an awful lot, you should recognize what you've done so far, and above all, you shouldn't let it all collapse. And that the project is in danger, and I think that it is almost because the project is in danger that the Nobel Committee has decided to give the award. The irony, of course, is that Norway itself, where the Nobel Committee sits, is not a member, and indeed the chairman of the committee recognized that support in Norway for joining the EU is at an all-time low.
What effect do you think it will have on the EU, and what effect will it have on the committee's own credibility and standing?
I think it'll have a short-term fillip. Everyone was walking with a slight spring in their step today, but I don't think it's going to change the fundamental dynamics of the crisis. I don't think it's going to affect creditor countries' unwillingness to pay a lot more to help countries in trouble. It's not going to change countries in trouble's resentment of conditions that are imposed on them. What does it say about the Nobel Committee? Well, you know, sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. Nobody would deny that the EU has been part of consolidating peace and, yes, prosperity in Europe. At the same time, it's an incomplete story. Part of the reason there has been peace in Europe has been the creation of NATO and the presence of American forces on European soil for the decades of the Cold War. So it's part of the story, not the whole story.
Anton LaGuardia joining us from Brussels. Thanks very much for your perspective. Well, we can get someone else's and turn to Romano Prodi, who was president of the European Commission from 1999 until 2004, ensuring that the EU law is applied in member states. He joins us now on the line as he travels to Bergamo in Italy. Mr. Prodi, obviously the EU extremely happy and honored about this award, but a lot of people are looking at it very skeptically, saying it is a farce, it's a joke. How do you respond to them?
Well, you think that is a joke only if you don't analyze the history of Europe. We came from a tragic series of wars. We didn't have any generation without the young people were killed in war. Now we have 60 years of peace, unity, a great market, and we had also the enlargement to the former Soviet Union countries, and we have exported democracy without war, in peace.
Well, that may be the case, Mr. Prodi, but looking at the world today, looking at it this year, what justifies this award in your opinion?
No. Well, the award is not for today. It has been given for 60 years of history. And today we are in a crisis, and Europe always developed through crisis, and Europe has always overcome crisis. We had also times in which there was an empty chair left by France, recovered, and I think that the worst is over, and you will see that the Euro crisis will be overcome.
But looking certainly at the state of Europe today, the crisis within the Eurozone, the massive protests that we've seen in recent months in several European countries, the economic hardship, the austerity measures, and the anger that has generated, some simply argue and say that instead of bringing peace and harmony, the EU will cause insurgency and violence, a lot of instability.
Look, it's clear. When you have great goals, great achievements, and you have to do them in a democratic process, you need a lot of time for adaptation. You need political intelligence, you need flexibility, and you need solidarity. And you don't build them in one day. But everybody, a lot of people who were telling you that Europe should have collapsed soon, they're a bit disappointed in Europe. The euro did not collapse. The euro is not collapsing. We have difficulties. But we, step by step, have started to build instruments in order to overcome these difficulties. Clearly, if you look only to today or tomorrow morning, we are in a tragedy. But if you look to the future, I think that we shall complete the endeavor that we have done in the last 60 years. We shall need many, many years again to have a European unity.
Romano Prodi, former Prime Minister of Italy and former President of the European Commission, thank you very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us on this. Thank you.